Now, in terms of off Broadway theaters, we mentioned one specifically, and that is La Mama. La Mama, formed in 1961 by Ellen Stewart. The goal or the mission of La Mama is to provide a space, a platform for international theater artists in this country to come and showcase their work here in the U.S. And this model was extreme is has been extremely successful. Uh, La Mama has been in existence since 1961 and currently has an exciting season. I encourage you to visit La Mama the website and see what they are doing right now, as a matter of fact. Um, La Mama, we also said, was significant for the plays that started there. One specifically, Hair, the musical Hair. Uh, Hair, in addition to being a uh, very important play from that period, the 1960s. Uh, um, Spoke about it was in response to the Vietnam War. Uh, the play moved from La Mama to Broadway and became the first play on Broadway to actually expose the audience to nudity and obscenity. Uh, Great distinction for them. Um, From there, we talked about alternative theater groups. The first being the Living Theater. The Living Theater. The leaders of the Living Theater were a couple, Judith Malina and Julian Beck. And their uh, um, identifiable production, the one that they're most popular, I guess, for or most known for, and that is Paradise Now. This the Living Theater was theater uh, presented represented theater anarchy. That was their practice. They were in aggressive um, and confrontational. They, of course, objected to the Vietnam War and the draft, also the need to have documentation as you moved from one country to another, and and they smoked weed on stage and they were nude. Uh, Now this is please understand, we had Hair on Broadway with nudity and obscenity, but this wasn't Broadway. This was theater that was performed in an open space. This was not a typical theater setup with a stage and an audience. The audience was around, the performers mixed in with the crowd. It was aggressive. They burned money on stage. We saw a video of them. You remember. Uh, Next, we talked about the Polish Laboratory Theater. The Polish Laboratory Theater's founder or leader, Jerzy Grotowski. Jerzy Grotowski, um, well, the philosophy, of course, was that to make theater, all you need is a good play, well trained actors, and the simplest of set, a table and a couple of chairs. Spectacle is absent. There is basically no spectacle to the poor theater idea. Jerzy Grotowski wrote a book, Towards a Poor Theater, which describes and talks about that whole philosophy. Um, Moving into chapter 9, we talked about um, culture, theater diversity, and the plays that uh, came from up to that time of an underrepresented um, group, plays by African Americans. For example, Lorraine Hansberry's play A Raisin in the Sun was written in 1959 and became the first play by an African American playwright, a woman, to run on Broadway. Very significant. Um, an example of African American playwrights who were not in the mainstream by any stretch of the imagination and not bound for Broadway, but they're present, a part of the landscape, and making a significant contribution. One, for example, is Amiri Baraka, Leroy Jones, who had um, a saying, a slogan, mantra, if you will, about his plays: by us, about us, for us. This was African American theater intended for an African American audience. Um, his play Dutchman is one that we talked about in class. Second, or third, excuse me, we have to talk about August Wilson and his century cycle, his 10 play cycle of plays, one for every decade of the 20th century. We mentioned two. Fences, which has been made into a movie um, with Denzel Washington and Viola Davis, and also Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, which has Chadwick Boseman, once again Viola Davis, directed by George C. Wolfe. Excellent, excellent production. Um, Also, we talked about the work of Tony Kushner in terms of diversity. Uh, his play Angels in America, Millennium Approaches, uh, is one that addresses the AIDS crisis, written in 1991, very early on there, um, and puts a more of a universal face on the disease, one that is reaching out beyond the where it unfortunately originated, which was in the gay community among gay men. Very, very powerful play. Now we have to talk about postmodernism. Um, the best way, it's kind of hard to describe, but to get a grasp on the concept, the idea is that with postmodernism, we have the freedom to break down barriers. We are not limited by what we have seen to be um, the restrictions, the things that define a movement. Realism, expressionism is defined by these qualities. With postmodernism, everything is possible in terms of how the director wants to tell the story, more or less. We have more of a freedom. The boundaries are broken down. Barriers are no longer there. For example, your text takes an example of comedy of errors, a Shakespeare comedy. Uh, Instead of being told in a traditional way, the play was or utilized jugglers as these characters. brothers, and the Karamazov brothers were their names. So that's an example of breaking down barriers. There are many others. I'll be right back.